So let's start implementing NGRX in our course project. And I chose the course project for that because I think you'll learn the most if you really see how it's implemented in a real application. Now, again, I stressed this on the slides already, but it is important to me. You could definitely leave the app as it is. It's not bad, not a bad practice or anything like that if you manage your state with services and with RxJS subjects. This is absolutely fine, and there is no reason to change this if you don't want to or if you see no advantage in NGRX. But my recommendation would be that you go through this module where we have a look at NGRX in great detail, and you then simply decide for yourself. Do you like that pattern? Do you maybe see its advantages in larger apps, and do you want to use it there? And then you will already have learned it. And that, of course, is what this module and this course is all about. So to get started, we first of all need to install NGRX because it is an extra package which you need to install through NPM. As I mentioned, it is maintained by parts of the Angular team and also by the community. So you install it by running npm install in your project folder, --save to also add an entry to package.json, and then it's at ngrx/store. This is the first package we need. And I say first package because we'll later also need some other packages, but this is the core of NGRX, which you always need and which gives you the core features you need to get started. So let's now hit enter and let's wait for this installation to complete. With the installation finished, you can restart ngserve to bring your development server back up and this development process. And now we can get started adding NGRX. Now, if you recall that slide from earlier, you see that the core parts that we will probably need right now to get started are the store, the reducers, and the actions. Now, store and reducers are tightly coupled together. So let's get started by implementing a reducer. And for that, in that shopping list folder here, I will simply add a new file next to the shopping list service and so on, which I'll name shoppinglist.reducer.ts. So the shopping list reducer file here is the file I added. And in there, we have to provide such a reducer. Now, how does such a NGRX Redux reducer look like? As I said, it's just a function. So you should export a function here, which you can give any name you want, and I'll name mine shopping list reducer. And that function, that's now important, receives two arguments automatically because we will soon add it such that it's automatically managed by the NGRX package. And this NGRX package will in the end be the part that calls this function, not right now, but soon. And the NGRX package will therefore pass these arguments into this function. So we can rely on two arguments being passed into this function. And that's the state, so the current state before it was changed. It's changed by the reducer, so obviously we get it before it was changed. And the second argument is the action, because keep in mind, it's the action that triggers the reducer and in the end a state update. So these two things are passed in by NGRX. Now inside of that function, we can now find out which kind of action it is and update the state. Now for this, we also can set up an initial state. Because if you have a look at your shopping list service, which of course is the thing we're trying to replace here, you would say the ingredients, that basically is our state, right? That is the data we're managing here. That also is initialized with a default value. We start with two ingredients. Now, of course, you don't have to do that, but here in this app we are. So this would be our current state and this would be our initial state. And therefore, it would make sense to have a similar initial state here when we switch to NGRX instead of using our own service. Hence, here in the shopping list reducer, we can create a new constant, which you can name initial state. That name is totally up to you, just like this function name here, by the way. So here I'll name it initial state, and this should be a JavaScript object. Your state should be a JavaScript object. It actually doesn't necessarily need to be one, But for anything but very trivial apps or very specific cases, it probably will be a JavaScript object because that simply allows you to group more different data together. So here we have a shopping list service object, and in there, it would make sense to have an ingredients property. So let me copy that ingredients property, including the type and the two ingredients, and add this here to this newly added object. Now the ingredient type is missing here, so we have to add this import to this file, and I used my IDE to automatically add it. Now we need to edit this a little bit. Since we're in a JavaScript object, we don't assign values with an equal sign, but with a colon, like this. And TypeScript is able to infer the type automatically because this is an array of ingredients, and hence TypeScript automatically assumes that it, well, is an array of ingredients. So that is our initial state here. Now we can set that initial state by giving this first argument we're getting here in that function initial state as a default value. Now that's a TypeScript or next-gen JavaScript feature. You can assign default values to function arguments, which means if that function argument is not set or would be null otherwise, then this initial state is passed in instead. So the first time this reducer will run, it will receive that initial state for subsequent actions. So once the state has been initialized for the first time, and it will be initialized globally by NGRX, once it has been initialized, state will always be the previous state, only for the first time. So when NGRX is initializing the application state, it will be our initial state.